Hello, my name is Dominic. I'm 42 years old and I'm a truck driver. My life consists of endless hauls across highways, the smell of diesel clinging to my clothes, and exhausted nights holding my son Ethan as he sleeps in our small room. But I have something more precious than gold. A home in Maplewood, a small town in America, where my wife Julie, our 8-year-old son, and I are starting to build beautiful plans in our new house. There's also my father-in-law, Frank, a kind, smiling man with skilled carpenter hands who helped us turn the dream of owning a home into reality. Maplewood isn't the kind of place you'd find on postcards. It has no skyscrapers or dazzling neon lights. The town nestles quietly amid sprawling cornfields and dusty red dirt roads that kick up clouds whenever a truck passes by. But when I first drove my old pickup truck past the "Welcome to Maplewood" sign, I felt a strange warmth surge in my chest. Maybe it was because I was tired of years living hand-to-mouth in a cramped city apartment, where honking horns and the smell of exhaust were my only companions. Or maybe it was the sparkle in Ethan's eyes when he pointed to the expansive backyard of our new home and shouted, "Dad, I want to build a treehouse." The house we bought was a journey in itself. 15 years of driving trucks, hauling cargo from the East Coast to the West, sleeping in my cab to save every penny. Julie and I finally scraped together enough for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom home. It's not big, not flashy, but it's ours. A house with cream-colored walls now yellowed with age, a gray-tiled roof weathered by time, and a spacious backyard where an ancient oak tree stands tall like a sentinel. That oak, with its lush branches and gnarled trunk, captured Ethan's imagination from day one. "Dad, Grandpa can build a treehouse there, right?" he asked, his voice brimming with excitement. Looking into my son's big, round, brown eyes, I promised myself that even if it meant working another 20 years, I'd give him a full, happy childhood. Julie, my wife, is the strongest woman I've ever known. She works as a nurse at the local hospital, enduring long night shifts and rare days off. Yet every time she comes home, she finds a way to make Ethan and me laugh, whether it's with a funny story about a patient or a simple dinner of her homemade spaghetti. Julie is the glue that holds our family together, and she always says our Maplewood home is a chance for us to truly live, not just survive. I don't know what I did to deserve her, but I know I'd do anything to keep that smile on her face. My father-in-law, Frank, is an indispensable part of this story. He's over 60 with white hair and a slightly stooped gait, but his hands are as strong as they were when he worked as a carpenter in a wood shop. After my mother-in-law passed away 2 years ago, we invited him to live with us. He's the one who taught me how to fix a leaky pipe, build a sturdy shelf, and most importantly, how to stay patient when things don't go as planned. To Ethan, he's a hero. Back when Frank used to visit, Ethan would rush out, hug him tightly, and drag him to the backyard to point at the oak tree, talking about the secret base they'd build together. The day we moved into Maplewood, I vividly remember standing in the backyard, breathing in the fresh air tinged with the scent of newly cut grass. Ethan ran around the oak tree, pretending to be a knight defending his castle, while Julie stood on the porch holding a cardboard box and smiling at me. "We did it, Dom," she said, her voice choked with emotion. I nodded, fighting back the tears welling in my eyes. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a place to call home. But life, as I've learned from those long hauls, is never as simple as we'd like. Just as we began to settle in, a strange wind blew into Maplewood, bringing my younger brother, Gabriel. He's 35, unmarried, childless, living a carefree life as if time could never touch him. Gabriel grew up spoiled by our parents, who always saw him as the golden child because of his lively personality and smooth-talking ways. While I worked tirelessly to make a living, Gabriel drifted from one job to another, one party to the next, always with our parents behind him to pay his rent or clean up his messes. When I bought the house in Maplewood, I thought it was my own victory, a milestone no one could take away. But about 6 months ago, I got word that Gabriel was moving in, right next door. In an inexplicable moment of indulgence, my parents bought him a house that was for sale in the neighborhood. Brothers should be close to support each other, my mom said over the phone, her voice full of hope. I gripped the phone tightly, trying to stay calm, but inside a storm was brewing. Gabriel wasn't coming to support me. He was coming because he was jealous, because he couldn't stand that I had something he didn't. The day Gabriel moved in, I stood on my porch watching his moving truck pull up to the house next door. His place was slightly smaller than ours, but still decent, with a white picket fence and a small front garden. Gabriel stepped out of the truck wearing an open-collared shirt and expensive sunglasses, flashing a smug smile as if the whole world belonged to him. "Hey, big brother," he said, waving at me like we were old pals. I nodded, forcing a stiff smile, but deep down I knew things were about to change. I tried. I really did. I invited Gabriel over for dinner and even politely congratulated him when he bragged that our parents had gifted him the house. But inside it felt like a thorn was piercing my chest. All those years I struggled, saving every cent, while Gabriel just had to ask and got everything. Julie noticed my tension, placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Ignore him, Dom. We have each other and that's enough." But I knew deep down that Gabriel wasn't just here to live nearby. He was here to disrupt the peace I'd sweated to build. In the days that followed, Gabriel showed his true colors. The loud parties started the first week with blaring music from his house echoing until midnight. Cars parked haphazardly in front of his yard, and the laughter and shouting of his friends shook the neighborhood. Ethan, with tired eyes from lack of sleep, asked me, "Does Uncle Gabriel hate us, Dad?" I hugged my son, telling him it wasn't true, that his uncle just liked to have fun. But I knew I was lying. Gabriel didn't hate us, he just didn't care. About Ethan, about Julie, about this neighborhood. And that, more than anything, made my blood boil. I tried talking to Gabriel like a brother should. One afternoon, I knocked on his door, bringing a beer as a way to ease the tension. "Gabriel, can you turn it down a bit? Ethan needs to sleep for school." He looked at me, smirking. "Relax, man, this is my house. I'll do what I want." That comment felt like a slap. I walked back home, fists clenched, telling myself I wouldn't let him destroy what I'd built. But I didn't know then that just a few weeks later, Gabriel would do something far worse. And it would start with Ethan's beloved oak tree, with Skyfort, the dream my son and his grandfather had built together. The weeks that followed in Maplewood passed like a half-hearted dream, where joy mingled with gusts of unease. I tried to savor every moment with Ethan and Julie, those evenings sitting on the porch listening to the cicadas or watching Ethan run around the oak tree pretending to be an astronaut on a distant planet. But the noise from Gabriel's house, like an incessant drumbeat, always found a way to creep into our peace. His parties weren't just blaring music or raucous laughter. They were a reminder that Gabriel hadn't come to blend in. He came to claim space, to assert his presence, no matter who it hurt. Yet amid the small storms Gabriel brought, there was one thing that made me, Julie, and especially Ethan feel like we truly belonged in Maplewood: the Treehouse project. It started as Ethan's idea, but my father-in-law, Frank, was the one who brought it to life. Frank was the kind of man who, with a hammer and nails in hand, made you believe he could build a castle. Ethan, with the boundless imagination of an 8-year-old, had scribbled a design for Skyfort on a piece of notebook paper, its crooked lines brimming with enthusiasm. "It's gonna be our secret base, Dad," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Grandpa and I are gonna make it awesome." I still remember the morning Frank brought out his old toolbox and a warm smile. He sat down with Ethan on the grass, listening as the boy rambled about how Skyfort needed a trapdoor to hide from enemies and a rope ladder to climb like a pirate. "All right, Knight Ethan," Frank said, ruffling his hair. "We'll build a fortress no enemy can breach." I stood there, watching them measure the oak tree, laughing and joking. And I thought that no matter how tough life got, moments like these were why I never gave up. They didn't use a pre-made kit like other families might. Frank insisted that Skyfort be built from scratch, every plank, every nail. He taught Ethan how to hold a saw, how to hammer a nail without bending it, and how to measure a right angle to ensure the treehouse floor was sturdy. Julie and I pitched in, but it was mostly their project, grandfather and grandson. Every weekend afternoon, our backyard was filled with the sound of hammering, Ethan's laughter, and Frank's gentle guidance. After 3 weeks, Sky Fort was complete. A small treehouse on the oak painted blue and yellow, Ethan's favorite colors, with a solid wooden floor, a secret trapdoor, and a rope ladder swaying in the breeze. Ethan stood at the base of the tree, looking up with his mouth agape. "This is my house," he shouted, then launched himself into Frank's arms so tightly I thought he'd knock him over. That night we held a little grand opening ceremony. Julie baked chocolate chip cookies, I brought out a pitcher of lemonade, and Frank shared stories about building treehouses with his own brother when he was young. Ethan, nestled in his grandpa's lap, listened intently, occasionally interrupting to ask, "Grandpa, did pirates ever attack you back then?" We laughed, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. For the first time, I thought Maplewood wasn't just where we lived, it was home. But happiness is often more fragile than we think. One early weekend morning, about a week and a half after Sky Fort was finished, I was jolted awake by an odd sound. It wasn't the usual blaring music from Gabriel's house or the roar of his friends' motorcycles. It was a sharp, growling noise like a chainsaw tearing through something. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Julie, folding clothes in the living room, looked up with furrowed brows. "Dom, do you hear that?" she asked. I didn't answer. I rushed to the back door, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, and when I stepped into the yard, it felt like the blood in my veins turned to ice. The oak tree still stood, but Sky Fort, Ethan and Frank's pride and joy, was gone. In its place was a pile of splintered wood scattered on the grass, the blue and yellow planks sawed to pieces, the rope ladder torn apart, the trapdoor lying alone in the dirt. The base of the oak bore a deep, cruel cut, as if someone had tried to kill the tree itself. I stood there, unable to breathe, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. "Dom, what's going on?" Julie ran out, her voice panicked. She stopped beside me, hand over her mouth as she saw the wreckage. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes welling up. I turned back, terrified that Ethan would run out and see. Thankfully, he was still asleep, unaware that his dream had been shattered. I knelt down, picking up a piece of yellow-painted wood, its sharp edge cutting into my hand. Who did this? The question swirled in my mind, but I knew the answer. Deep down, I knew only one person was cruel and selfish enough to do this. I stood up, looking toward the house next door. Gabriel's windows were lit, and I could hear his laughter as if nothing had happened. "Where are you going?" Julie grabbed my arm as I stepped toward the fence. "Dom, calm down. You don't know for sure it was him." "I know," I growled, pulling my arm free. "I know it was Gabriel." I pounded on his door so hard my knuckles ached. He opened it, still in his open-collared shirt, hair disheveled, with a half-smirk on his face. "What's got you so worked up, big brother?" he asked, his tone casual. "The treehouse," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "What did you do to Ethan's treehouse?" Gabriel shrugged, leaning against the doorframe like he was performing in a play. "Oh, that messy pile of wood on the tree, man, it was an eyesore. Ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic. I was just helping clean it up." I felt the blood rush to my head. "You sawed it to pieces. You cut the oak tree?" I stepped forward, grabbing his collar, but Gabriel pushed me back, his eyes flashing with defiance. "Chill out, man. It's just a treehouse. It's not the end of the world." He sneered mockingly. "Besides, the kid will get over it. Kids do." I wanted to punch him, to scream that it wasn't just a treehouse. It was Ethan's dream, the days Frank spent sweating under the sun, the joy we'd built piece by piece. But I didn't do anything. I turned and walked back home because I knew if I stayed, I'd do something I'd regret. When I returned, Julie was sitting on the porch steps, her eyes red. "Ethan just woke up," she said, her voice choked. "He saw it." I ran into the living room, where Ethan sat curled up on the couch, clutching his old stuffed bear. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. He just looked at me, his voice tiny. "Dad, who broke Sky Fort?" "Grandpa and I worked so hard on it. I knelt in front of my son, pulling him into my arms. "I don't know, buddy," I lied, because I didn't want Ethan to think badly of his uncle, even though I was seething with hatred for Gabriel. "But I promise we'll build it again, even better, okay?" Ethan nodded, but the spark I loved in his eyes was gone. I held him tighter, feeling a new wave of anger surge in my chest. Gabriel hadn't just destroyed a treehouse. He destroyed my son's joy, and that I swore I would never forgive. My father-in-law, sitting in the kitchen, had already heard part of the story. He was silent for a long time before calling me over and speaking quietly. "Dom, I know you want to do something, but be careful. Gabriel's your brother, and family isn't easy to mend once it's broken." But I heard the pain in his voice, and I knew he was angry too, even if he tried to hide it. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay still in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Julie's steady breathing beside me. In my mind, images of the splintered wood, the ugly cut on the oak's trunk, and Ethan's sad eyes played on repeat, searing into my soul. I knew Gabriel had crossed a line. I understood that I couldn't let this slide, couldn't let him walk away unscathed. And though I didn't want to admit it, I knew the battle between us was only just beginning. I wouldn't let him win. Never. Ever since the day Skyfort was destroyed, it felt like a heavy stone was pressing down on my chest. Every time I looked out at the backyard where the scattered blue and yellow wood fragments still lay under the oak tree, Ethan's sad eyes haunted my mind. He no longer ran around the yard or talked about his secret base. Instead, he sat quietly in his room, clutching his stuffed bear, occasionally asking, "Dad, when are we going to rebuild Skyfort?" I promised my son we would, but each promise felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I wasn't just angry that Gabriel had demolished the treehouse. I was furious that he'd stolen my son's joy and hard work. Julie noticed the change in me. She always knew when I was on the verge of exploding. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring at the wall, Julie placed her hand on my shoulder. "Dom, don't let Gabriel make you lose control," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We'll get through this." For Ethan, I nodded, but deep down I knew I couldn't just stand still. Gabriel wasn't just a selfish brother, he was a threat, a relentless storm battering the home we'd worked so hard to build. And though I didn't want to admit it, I was starting to think about how to fight back. The opportunity came on a Friday night, about 2 weeks after the treehouse was destroyed. The music from Gabriel's house blared again, as piercing as ever, accompanied by laughter and the clinking of glass bottles. I stood at the kitchen window looking out at his yard. Gabriel's friends, a group of flashy-dressed young people, were gathered around a wooden table outside, littered with beer bottles and wine glasses. I gripped the windowsill tightly, trying to suppress my anger. But then I noticed something. Among the group were a few faces that looked much younger, maybe 18 or 19, holding drinks and laughing loudly. In the US, the legal drinking age is 21. What was Gabriel doing? Supplying alcohol to minors right in front of the whole neighborhood? I turned back into the house, my heart pounding. Julie was reading to Ethan in his room. I didn't want her to worry, so I quietly grabbed my phone and checked the local laws online. In Maplewood, providing alcohol to anyone under 21 was a serious violation, punishable by fines or even an investigation. I knew I was at a crossroads. Part of me, the part Frank always reminded me of, wanted to keep the peace because family is family. But the other part, the father who saw the sadness in Ethan's eyes, wanted Gabriel to pay. I stepped out to the back porch where the cool night air calmed the heat in my head. I called the police, keeping my voice steady. "Hi, I'd like to report a party in my neighborhood," I said, giving Gabriel's address. "There are some young people, possibly under 21, drinking openly. I'm not sure, but I thought I should report it so you can check." The dispatcher thanked me and said they'd send a team right away. I hung up, feeling both relieved and tense. I didn't want to confront Gabriel directly, didn't want Ethan to see his dad turn into an aggressive man. But I also couldn't let him keep disrupting our lives. About 20 minutes later, 2 police cars quietly pulled up in front of Gabriel's house. I stood at the living room window, the curtain slightly parted, watching it unfold. The red and blue lights of the police cars flashed through the night. Some of Gabriel's friends panicked, hastily hiding beer bottles under the table, but it was too late. The officers walked into the yard, asking everyone to show ID. I saw Gabriel, his face red with anger and embarrassment, trying to explain something to an officer. But when they checked the IDs of a few of the younger people, I knew he was in trouble. Some in the group were indeed under 21. The party broke up quickly. Gabriel's friends shot him dirty looks and a few yelled something at him before leaving. The police issued a citation and I overheard them mention a hefty fine for violating laws about providing alcohol to minors. Gabriel stood there, hands on his hips, watching his friends leave, then turned to glare toward my house. I pulled the curtain shut, my heart racing. He didn't know I'd called the police, but I knew he suspected. And while I felt a flicker of satisfaction, I also began to worry. Gabriel wasn't the type to let things go. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and went out to the backyard to check on the oak tree. The chainsaw cut was still there, like a scar that would never heal. A little later, Ethan ran out wearing his Superman t-shirt and asked, "Dad, what happened at Uncle Gabriel's last night? I saw police cars." I forced a smile, keeping my voice calm. "You're up early, buddy. No need to worry. The police just came to handle a little issue." But Ethan, with a child's intuition, looked at me closely. Was it because of Skyfort? I shook my head and pulled him into a hug. "No, son. This is grown-up stuff. Dad and Grandpa will rebuild Skyfort, remember?" When Julie woke up, I told her about the police call. She looked at me, her eyes full of worry. "Dom, are you sure about this? Gabriel won't let it slide. He might call your parents and then things will get messier." I knew she was right. My parents always took Gabriel's side, and if he tattled, they'd blame me for causing a rift between brothers. But I didn't regret it. For the first time since the Treehouse incident, I felt like I'd done something, even if it was just a small strike. And sure enough, as Julie predicted, my phone rang that afternoon. It was my mom. "Dominic, why are you making things hard for your brother?" she began, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Gabriel said you called the police to ruin his party. You know he's just trying to fit in." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Gabriel destroyed Ethan's treehouse. I just wanted some peace in the neighborhood. I don't want trouble, but I can't let him do whatever he wants." My mom was silent for a moment, then sighed. "You're the older brother, Dominic. You need to be more forgiving. Gabriel doesn't mean any harm." I hung up, not wanting to argue further. But her words cut deep. For years, I'd always been the one who had to be forgiving, to step aside while Gabriel was coddled. I looked out at the yard, where Ethan was picking up a piece of wood from Skyfort's wreckage, and I told myself, I'm not doing this for Mom or Gabriel. I'm doing this for my son. That afternoon, Frank brought out a tray of cookies he and Ethan had baked together. He sat down beside me on the porch, handing me a cup of coffee. "Dom, about last night," he said, his voice low. "You did the right thing, but be careful. Gabriel's not the type to stop." I nodded, feeling his quiet support. Frank always understood me, understood that I didn't want war, but I also couldn't let Gabriel trample over my family. The days that followed were quieter in the neighborhood. Gabriel didn't throw any parties, but I knew he was silently fuming. I caught him glaring at me over the fence, his eyes cold as if to say, "This isn't over." I started installing security cameras in the backyard just in case he tried anything with the oak tree or anything else that belonged to Ethan. Every night I checked the windows and doors, feeling like I was preparing for a battle I didn't want to fight. But deep down, I knew I'd crossed a line. Calling the police wasn't just an act of retaliation. It was a declaration of war. And though I didn't want to admit it, I was ready for whatever came next. For Ethan, for Julie, for Frank, and for the home we'd poured our sweat into building, I wouldn't let Gabriel win. A few months after the Treehouse incident, Frank and Ethan finally regained their spirits and started preparing to build Skyfort 2.0. The grandfather and grandson duo eagerly worked on new sketches, heading to the store to buy the necessary supplies. Planks of wood, hammers, nails, and ropes once again filled our backyard. Their radiant smiles and laughter echoed through our cozy home. But then, like a poisonous breeze, Gabriel struck again. This time it wasn't just the treehouse, it was the entire neighborhood. One morning, as I was clearing weeds in the front yard, Mrs. Helen, a neighbor a few houses down, approached with a worried expression. She was an elderly woman who always brought cookies for Ethan and loved sharing stories about Maplewood from her younger days. "Dominic, have you heard anything about a letter?" she asked, handing me a folded piece of paper. I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat. It was a letter written on plain paper, its tone stiff and formal, sent from a concerned resident in the neighborhood. The letter demanded that Mrs. Helen's family remove the small plastic playground they'd set up for their grandson, claiming it ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic and caused unnecessary noise. I read it over and over, feeling as if cold water had been poured over me. I knew immediately who wrote it. Only one person was petty enough to do this, and the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Gabriel. "I got this letter yesterday," Mrs. Helen said, her voice trembling. "I don't understand. It's just a little slide set. It doesn't bother anyone. My grandson loves it, Dominic." I gripped the letter tightly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Don't worry, Mrs. Helen, I'll look into this." But inside I was certain. Gabriel wasn't just targeting me. He was trying to control the entire neighborhood, as if Maplewood were his personal playground. I started asking around, and what I discovered made my blood boil. Mrs. Helen wasn't the only one who received a letter. Mr. Carter, a veteran living at the end of the street, got a letter complaining about his grandson's bicycle left in the yard. The Torres family, who'd moved in a few months ago, were warned about a basketball hoop they'd hung in their front yard. All the letters had the same tone. Cold, arrogant, and signed, "A concerned resident." But I knew it was Gabriel. He hadn't just destroyed Ethan's treehouse. He couldn't stand anyone's joy, especially children's, as if their laughter was a personal insult to him. I came home and placed Mrs. Helen's letter on the kitchen table. Julie, washing dishes, looked at me with concern. "Dom, what's going on now?" I told her about the letters, about how Gabriel was turning the neighborhood into his own battlefield. "He thinks he's the king around here," I growled. "Destroying Ethan's treehouse wasn't enough. Now he's bullying the neighbors." Julie put her hand on my shoulder, but this time she didn't urge me to stay calm. "We have to do something, Dom," she said. "Not just for Ethan, but for everyone." I decided to dig deeper. I knocked on a few neighbors' doors, talking to them about the letters. Everyone was upset, and they all suspected Gabriel was behind it. "He's always friendly when he sees me," Mr. Carter said, but then he frowned. "But come to think of it, I've noticed him glaring at the kids when they play ball in the street." Mrs. Torres mentioned that Gabriel had stood in front of their house, staring at their basketball hoop with a look of disgust, as if it were a stain on his perfect neighborhood. I talked to my father-in-law, filling him in on everything. He sat in his armchair, listening calmly, but I noticed his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. A sign he was angry. "Dom, Gabriel's not just targeting you," he said. "He's trying to prove something, maybe to himself, but you need to be careful. If you confront him directly, he'll drag your parents into it, and things will get messier." I knew he was right, but I couldn't sit still. Gabriel wasn't just attacking Ethan's treehouse. He was trying to tear down the neighborhood we'd chosen as our home. I started thinking about a plan. Not direct retaliation, because I didn't want Ethan to see his dad become an aggressive man. I wanted to do something legal, smart, to make Gabriel understand he couldn't keep acting like a spoiled child forever. I called Mrs. Helen, Mr. Carter, and the Torres family, inviting them to our house on Saturday evening to talk. I wasn't sure exactly what my plan was, but I knew one thing. If Gabriel wanted to play at controlling the neighborhood, I'd show him that Maplewood didn't belong to him. That evening, the meeting took place around our kitchen table, where Julie had set out a tray of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and a pot of fragrant coffee to ease the tension. I spread out Gabriel's letters, each cold word like a small dagger piercing the pride of our neighborhood. "This isn't just about me," I said, my voice low but steady, trying to contain the simmering anger. "Gabriel destroyed Ethan's treehouse, and now he's targeting all of us. Mrs. Helen's grandson's playground, Mr. Carter's grandson's bike, the Torres family's basketball hoop, no one's safe from him." Mrs. Helen, her frail hands trembling, clutched her coffee mug tightly. "I don't understand why he'd do this," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "My grandson loves that playground. It's not bothering anyone." Mr. Carter, a former Marine with a posture still ramrod straight despite being over 70, nodded. "He thinks he can bully this whole neighborhood," he said, his voice deep and laced with indignation. "But I've seen his type before. They're only loud when no one fights back." Mrs. Torres, mother of 2 energetic boys, chimed in. "We moved here for a better life. I don't want my kids to be scared just because of a selfish neighbor." I looked around the room, seeing the resolve in everyone's eyes. Julie squeezed my hand under the table, her look saying, "Do it the right way, Dom." Frank, sitting at the corner of the table, quietly whittling a small piece of wood, a habit he had when deep in thought, finally spoke up. "We don't need to fight him, Dominic, but we can make him see that Maplewood isn't his personal playground." His words were like a small spark, igniting an idea in my mind. "We won't confront him directly," I said, my voice low but resolute. "We'll do small legal things to make him feel out of place. Kids drawing chalk on the sidewalk, adults playing loud music early in the morning when Gabriel's trying to sleep off his parties, shining bright lights into his house. And I'll rebuild Skyfort, bigger, better, so Ethan knows no one can steal his joy." Everyone nodded, their eyes lighting up as if they'd found a glimmer of hope. Julie smiled, but I saw a trace of worry in her eyes. "Be careful, Dom," she whispered. "Gabriel's not the type to sit still." The plan began the next morning, Sunday, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the oak trees. I pulled an old box of colored chalk from the shed and called Ethan and the neighborhood kids, Tommy, Mr. Carter's grandson, Maria and Luis, the Torres kids, and a few others. "Draw something awesome on the sidewalk in front of Uncle Gabriel's house," I said, winking at Ethan. He grinned brightly, the first real smile since the treehouse was destroyed, his brown eyes sparkling again. "I'm gonna draw a dragon," he shouted, running out to the street with a red chalk stick in hand. The kids cheered, drawing whimsical shapes, fire-breathing dragons, spaceships, pirates with eye patches, stretching across the sidewalk in front of Gabriel's house. I stood watching, my heart lighter as Ethan laughed loudly, his hands covered in chalk dust. But that was just the start. Mr. Carter, with a mischievous grin, brought out an old pair of speakers to his front yard, just a few steps from Gabriel's house. "Leave it to me," he said, plugging them in and blasting Sweet Home Alabama at a volume just loud enough to echo through the neighborhood. That morning, as the sun rose, the electric guitar riffs drowned out the birdsong. I saw Gabriel's curtains twitch, and I imagined him glaring out, eyes bleary from lack of sleep after another late-night party. Mrs. Torres joined in, playing lively salsa music from her backyard, prompting the kids to dance along. "If he hates noise, let him hear a little more," she said, laughing. Frank and I didn't sit it out either. We got to work rebuilding Skyfort, determined to make it grander than before. Every afternoon after I returned from my truck driving shift, Frank and I went to the backyard, measuring, sawing, and hammering. Ethan ran around, handing us nails or holding the tape measure, chattering non-stop about his new fortress. We painted the treehouse a vibrant blue and bright yellow, like a declaration that no one could extinguish his dream. I even installed a motion sensor light on the corner of Skyfort, aimed directly at Gabriel's bedroom window. Every time there was movement at night, the light would blaze, shining straight into his house. "He won't like this," Frank said with a chuckle, clapping my shoulder. "But he deserves it." These small actions, though not grand, brought the neighborhood back to life. The kids laughed and played, the adults started talking more, and Maplewood seemed to regain its breath. But I knew Gabriel wouldn't let it slide. He hadn't thrown any parties for a few days, but the glares he shot over the fence whenever I was in the backyard sent chills down my spine. He was waiting for his chance, and so was I. My chance came on a Tuesday night when the silvery moonlight bathed the oak tree. I was up late checking the security cameras, a new habit since the first Sky Fort was destroyed. Around midnight, my phone screen lit up, alerting me to movement in the backyard. I sprang out of bed, heart pounding, and looked out the window. Under the oak tree, Gabriel was sneaking around holding a pair of bolt cutters, the metal glinting in the moonlight. He was about to sabotage the new Sky Fort. I rushed out to the yard, barefoot on the cold, wet grass. "Gabriel!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet night. He flinched, spinning around, his eyes wide with panic. "What are you doing?" I pointed at the security camera on the corner of the house, its red light blinking like a warning. "Did you forget I installed this? One more step and I'm calling the police." Gabriel froze, the bolt cutters slipping from his hand and hitting the ground with a sharp clank. He stared at me, stammering, his eyes flickering between anger and fear. You wouldn't dare," he growled, but his usual confidence was gone. I stepped closer, just a few feet away, my voice icy. "Try me. Touch that treehouse again and I'll make sure you don't just lose face with this neighborhood." Gabriel backed away, then turned and fled, leaving the bolt cutters abandoned on the grass. I picked up the tool, my hands shaking with both anger and a touch of satisfaction. I went back inside, checked the camera footage, and saw Gabriel's panicked face clearly under the motion sensor light. Julie, woken by my shout, ran out and asked, "Dom, what happened?" I told her, my voice still trembling. He was going to destroy the treehouse again, but this time we have proof. Julie hugged me, whispering, "You did the right thing, but be careful, Dom. He won't give up easily." The next morning, I showed the video to Frank. He shook his head, his eyes full of disappointment. "He hasn't changed, Dom," he said. "But you did the right thing by not fighting him. We'll keep going, but our way." I nodded, knowing our plan was starting to hit Gabriel hard. In the days following the night, I caught Gabriel with bolt cutters poised to destroy the new Sky Fort. The atmosphere in Maplewood felt as taut as a guitar string. The neighborhood pressed on with our plan. Vibrant chalk drawings by the kids stretched across the sidewalk in front of Gabriel's house. Mr. Carter's rock music blared every morning, and the motion sensor light on Sky Fort lit up each night like a reminder that we wouldn't back down. But I knew Gabriel wasn't the type to give up easily. The look in his eyes as he fled my backyard that night wasn't just panic, it was hatred, and I could sense he was waiting for his chance to strike back. One evening, as Julie and I sat on the porch steps watching Ethan play with his stuffed bear under the glow of Sky Fort's light, she said, "Dom, I think Gabriel's being isolated, but that might make him more dangerous." I nodded, knowing she was right. Gabriel wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. Frank, always observing with the calm wisdom of experience, warned me too. "Dom, he's like a cornered animal. Be careful, because those types can lash out at any moment." I heightened my vigilance, checking the security cameras every night, locking the doors tightly and keeping an eye on Ethan whenever he played outside. The new Sky Fort was nearly complete now, taller and sturdier, painted in vibrant blue and yellow like a flag of victory. Ethan loved it, but I noticed he still glanced toward Gabriel's house with a hint of unease. Then on a Saturday morning, Gabriel's patience reached its breaking point. As usual, Mr. Carter had his speakers on, this time blasting Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild, the electric guitar riffs echoing through the neighborhood. I was making coffee in the kitchen, smiling at the thought of Gabriel fuming in his bedroom. But then through the window I saw a figure storm out of Gabriel's house, striding quickly with a face red with rage. It was Gabriel. He wore a crumpled t-shirt, his hair a mess, heading straight for Mr. Carter's house. I set my coffee mug down and ran to the front door, my heart pounding. By the time I got there, Gabriel was already in Mr. Carter's front yard yelling, "Turn off that damn speaker, old man!" Who do you think you are, ruining my sleep? Mr. Carter, standing on his porch with his military straight posture, didn't flinch. Son, this is my house, and I have the right to play my music. You throw parties at night, that's your right. I play my music in the morning, that's mine. His voice was calm but sharp, like a soldier unafraid of an enemy. Gabriel clenched his fists, stepping closer. You want to mess with me? He growled, his voice trembling with anger. I saw the situation spiraling out of control and rushed forward, stepping between them. Gabriel, stop! I shouted, pushing him back. But his bloodshot, hate-filled eyes sent a chill through me. You're behind all this, aren't you, Dominic? He roared, pointing at my face. You in this damn neighborhood, I'll make you all pay. Before I could respond, Gabriel suddenly shoved Mr. Carter, causing the older man to stumble, nearly falling. Mr. Carter, despite his age, regained his balance, but I felt the blood rush to my head. You dare touch him? I yelled, grabbing Gabriel's collar and yanking him away from the porch. At that moment, Mrs. Helen and Mrs. Torres ran over, joined by a few other neighbors drawn by the commotion. Gabriel, stop right now! Mrs. Helen shouted, her voice trembling but full of outrage. You think you can bully this entire neighborhood? Mrs. Torres, with the fierce demeanor of a protective mother, stepped toward Gabriel. You destroyed Ethan's treehouse, sent threatening letters to us, and now you dare attack Mr. Carter? You've gone too far. A crowd of neighbors began to gather, their angry glares fixed on Gabriel. A few kids, including Tommy and Maria, stood at a distance, watching him with a mix of fear and defiance. Gabriel, surrounded by furious faces, started to back away, but the tension in him erupted. Fine, he screamed, his voice breaking. You want a war? I'll give you a war. He lunged toward Mr. Carter again, but this time I was faster. I shoved him hard, sending him sprawling onto the grass. Enough, I yelled, standing protectively in front of Mr. Carter. Touch anyone in this neighborhood again, and I swear you'll regret it. Just then, the sound of police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone in the neighborhood, likely Mrs. Helen, had called the police. 2 officers stepped out of their car and approached us. What's going on here? One asked, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Mr. Carter, still composed, recounted the incident, pointing at Gabriel. He assaulted me, and this whole neighborhood saw it. I pulled out my phone, showing them the security camera footage that captured Gabriel shoving Mr. Carter. Gabriel, now looking like a trapped animal, tried to defend himself. I just told him to turn off the music, they're bullying me. But the officer shook his head and handcuffed him. You're coming with us to the station to sort this out. Gabriel struggled, shooting me a look that could burn through steel, but he had no way out. As the police car drove him away, the neighborhood fell silent save for the faint sound of Mr. Carter's rock music in the background. That night, I sat with Julie and Frank on the porch steps, watching Skyfort glow under the motion sensor light. Ethan was sound asleep in his room. Julie held my hand, her voice choked. Dom, you did the right thing. But I'm worried he'll come back. Frank, quiet as usual, said, He doesn't belong here anymore, Dom. He dug his own grave. A few days later, a for sale sign appeared in front of Gabriel's house. Under the pressure and isolation from the neighborhood combined with the assault on Mr. Carter, Gabriel finally decided to leave. When Ethan asked me, Dad, where's Uncle Gabriel going? I simply said, He's chosen his own path, buddy, but we're staying here and we'll keep Skyfort safe. I looked at my son, seeing the smile return to his face. But deep down, I knew the cost of this victory. My relationship with Gabriel, already fractured for years, was now likely beyond repair. And though I had no regrets, I felt a pang of sorrow thinking about the brother who was once part of my childhood. When the for sale sign appeared in front of Gabriel's house, I thought it was over. But a small aftershock of the storm lingered, arriving on a Sunday afternoon as I helped Frank paint the backyard fence. A familiar silver sedan pulled up in front of our house, my parents' car. My heart skipped a beat. They hadn't called ahead, but I knew why they were here. It was about Gabriel. I wiped my hands on my old t-shirt, walked to the front yard, and braced myself for the inevitable. My dad stepped out first, his silver hair catching the light, his posture slightly stooped. My mom followed, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. "Dominic," she said, her voice trembling with reproach. "How could you let this happen? Gabriel has to sell his house and leave Maplewood. You're his older brother. You should have helped him, not pushed him to the edge." I stood there feeling like I'd been slapped. For years, I'd been the one expected to help Gabriel, to step aside, to endure. "Mom, I didn't push Gabriel out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He did that himself. He destroyed Ethan's treehouse, sent threatening letters to the neighbors, and attacked Mr. Carter. I was just protecting my family." My dad shook his head, his eyes heavy with disappointment. "You're too selfish, Dominic. Gabriel was just trying to fit in. He needed time. You should have talked to him instead of calling the police or turning the whole neighborhood against him." His words cut like a knife. I wanted to scream, to recount every detail of what Gabriel had done, from the chainsaw mark on the oak tree to the bolt cutters in his hand. But I knew they wouldn't listen. They never truly had. At that moment, Frank stepped out from the backyard, still holding a paintbrush. He wiped his hands on his apron and looked at my parents with a calm but piercing gaze. "Folks," he said, his voice low and steady, "I understand Gabriel's your son, but hear me out. Dominic didn't do anything wrong. He was protecting Ethan, protecting this neighborhood. Gabriel went too far, destroying the treehouse, threatening neighbors, and assaulting an elderly man. Do you know how much it broke your grandson's heart to see Skyfort torn to pieces?" My mom opened her mouth to argue, but Frank raised a hand, stopping her. "Let me finish. I've been here, seen it all. Gabriel's not the victim. He chose this path, and with all due respect, you've coddled him for too long." His words were direct but not harsh, like a father explaining a child's mistake. Before my parents could respond, Mrs. Helen, Mr. Carter, and Mrs. Torres appeared from down the street. They must have seen my parents' car and decided to join in. Mrs. Helen stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Do you know Gabriel sent us threatening letters? He said my grandson's playground ruined the neighborhood's look, that Mr. Carter's grandson's bike was trash. We just want to live in peace, but Gabriel wouldn't allow it." Mr. Carter, standing tall, added, "He attacked me right in my front yard. If Dominic hadn't stepped in, I don't know what would have happened. He's not the victim here, folks. He's the troublemaker." Mrs. Torres, clutching a scarf tightly, continued, "We tried to tolerate Gabriel because he's Dominic's brother. But he respects no one. Not this neighborhood, not anyone. Dominic did what any father, any neighbor would do, protect his family and his community." My parents stood there, silent for a long moment, their eyes flickering between anger and confusion. I saw my mom blink rapidly as if fighting back tears. My dad, usually stoic and reserved, sighed and looked at the ground. We thought Gabriel was just trying to fit in. We didn't realize things had gotten this bad." Frank placed a hand on my dad's shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "You've given Gabriel plenty of chances, but he hasn't changed, and now he has to face the consequences of his actions. Dominic didn't push Gabriel out. Gabriel chose that path himself." The air grew heavy. My mom wiped her eyes, looking at me with an expression that, for the first time, held a hint of remorse. "Dominic, I'm sorry," she said, her voice choked. "I didn't know what you've been through. I just wanted our family to stay together." My dad nodded but said nothing. I could tell he was wrestling with the realization that he'd been wrong to always defend Gabriel. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug them, to tell them I forgave them, that I understood they were just trying to protect their youngest son. But another part, the father who'd seen the sadness in Ethan's eyes, couldn't forget what Gabriel had done. "I don't want our family to fall apart," I said, my voice low. "But I had to protect Ethan, Julie, and this neighborhood. Gabriel had his chances, but he didn't take them." My parents left soon after without saying much more. I stood on the porch watching their silver car disappear down the street, feeling like I'd lost a piece of my childhood. Gabriel wasn't just my brother, he was once the kid who played with me under the oak tree at Grandma's house, who rode bikes with me down dusty red roads. But now he was an adult, and his choices had driven a wedge between us. That night, Julie, Frank, and I sat on the porch steps watching Skyfort glow under the motion sensor light. Ethan was fast asleep in his room. Julie held my hand, whispering, "You did the right thing, Dom. No matter how hard it was, you protected us." Frank nodded, his eyes kind but resolute. "You made me proud, Dom. Not everyone has the courage to stand up like that." I looked at Skyfort, thinking of Ethan, of the days when he'd grow up and might forget the conflict with his Uncle Gabriel. I wondered if he'd remember this treehouse as a symbol of joy or as a battlefield his dad had quietly fought on. I was tired of the rift with Gabriel, of my parents' criticism, but I had no regrets. Maplewood was our home, and I'd done everything to protect it. Under the moonlight, Skyfort stood strong and radiant, a reminder that my family, my neighborhood, and Ethan's dreams were worth fighting for. And I, despite the invisible scars, would keep driving my truck down long highways, carrying the belief that we deserved this peace.